Everyone, it's Mary. Welcome back to my channel where we talk about all things related to the storytelling industry. And as you can tell, I am in a little bit of a different spot here. I'm actually recording on StreamYard, which I've never recorded on. So I apologize if things are a little bit glitchy and you can see a lovely shot of my real office because the background was making my arms disappear. Let me know how this works out. If it works out well, I'll do it again. If not, let me know you hate it. All right, as you can tell by the title of this video, we're going to talk about plotting. And I thought, what a perfect time to talk about plotting because it is NaNoWriMo season. We're in Preptober officially. I love fall. I love fall for multiple reasons. Number one, I just actually really like fall. I love the weather. I love watching the leaves change and the colors. I love sweaters and maple flavored coffee. And not pumpkin spice. Y'all can keep your pumpkin spice, but I will take all the other fall. Like, I am the stereotypical Facebook meme about the white girl waiting for fall. That is me. I am 100% that lady. But part two is I love it because it's NaNoWriMo season. And NaNoWriMo is the reason why I am an author today. I always loved writing, and I always tinkered with writing growing up. But back in, I think it was sometime between 2008 and 2010, because I remember I had graduated from college, but I was still living at home with my parents, and we hadn't moved to Indianapolis yet. So it was sometime between 2008 and 2010, I first discovered NaNoWriMo. And it changed my entire life. It was the first time that I sat down and actually wrote a book of any kind. I was so inspired by all the other people that were writing, and to this day, nothing gets me more fired up and excited than NaNoWriMo. I am such a fan of NaNoWriMo. Don't get me started. We'll be here for the next hour. But most of my best ideas and best plot lines have came from NaNoWriMo. True story. All right, so with that being said, I wanted to get in and talk about plotting. Now, look, I understand that not everybody likes to plot, right? Some people are plotters, some people are pantsers, some people are plantsers. But I'm a plotter, and I am a detailed plotter. Like, I get into all the details because I have found that by doing this, I run into less issues with writer's block. I used to be a person that in my beginning days, I was very much a pantser and a little bit of a planter. But what I would find is that I would end up with writer's block because I would get to like the midpoint of my book and be like, I have no idea what to do. I would have a great beginning and a great ending, and the middle would just get lost. So I have found that by plotting in detail, it helps me to not hit that point of writer's block. Now, with that being said, I will still deviate from my plan. Like if I'm in the middle of writing a story and I'm like, ooh, this would work better, I will backtrack it and I will rework my outline to fit in a new scene or just to see where that takes me and then go back and figure out the rest of the story from that point. But having a outline and a detailed plot of some sort keeps me from like sitting there and staring at a blank page and having no idea what to write. So I want to talk about two of my favorite ways of plotting today, just since it's early in the month to give you time to look at them. But I will say this, there are a ton of ways to plot. Everyone has their favorite way. And for most writers that I know, we don't necessarily follow one specific way of plotting. A lot of times you'll take bits and pieces from this way of doing it, bits and pieces from this, bits and pieces from this, and you sort of create your own version of plotting that's just a conglomerate of everybody else's ideas. And that's why I always recommend check them all out. Like some people love Save the Cat, check it out. Some people love, I don't know, name your device here. Check it out because you may be able, even if you don't think that works entirely for you, you may be able to find pieces of it that do work that you can use in other ways. So I'm going to show you my two favorite ways of doing it, and then hopefully you guys will find these helpful. So the first one I'm not going to talk about in detail, but the second one I am. And the very first one is actually more popular for romance authors. So if you talk to any romance author, not only will they know about this one, but they'll probably be able to know, they'll be able to like give you examples and just know exactly what you're talking about. And it's Romancing the Beat, which I'm going to show you guys here in a minute if I can get my thing to share the screen, because of course, working with StreamYard. Here we go. I think I can share the screen here. But you guys are probably very familiar with this if you're in the romance world. Again, because this is so popular. It's called Romancing the Beat by Gwen. It is story structure for romance novels, and this is kind of the golden standard for romance plotting. At least it has been in recent years. When was this book published? 2016. Yeah. So in recent years, this is what's most popular. And you'll actually hear authors be like, oh, I just came up with a new plot for this book that I'm outlining. And, you know, I hit all the beats. Well, when they're talking about hitting all the beats, these are the beats they're talking about. My library actually has this on audiobook. So I recommend checking your library to see if there's a copy. If for some reason they don't, this is very affordable online. I mean, the prices are not bad for this book. And again, if you are a romance writer, I recommend that you check this out because this is one of the best books I've found that really spells out how to write a good romance novel. Now, let's say you're looking at this and you're like, there is just no possible way that I am going to have time to read a book. Even if it's an audiobook, there's just no time for this, but I would like to look at this in more detail. You can actually go to Gwen's website, and I'm going to leave links to all of this. Anything I'm mentioning here, I will leave links to. You can go to her website and you can actually sign up to be on the newsletter to receive a free copy of sort of like a PDF summary version of this plot structure. Okay. And you'll get this. It's got an introduction and it actually breaks it down. So there are 4 phases to this and each one has beats. So that's what's called, you know, romancing the beats. So here's all your beats. So here's phase 1. It goes to phase 2, phase 3. Phase 4, and then at the very end, it gives you printable sheets so that you can print these out and you can figure out your own plot using these this structure here. So at the end of the day, I do recommend that you read the book because the book uses examples from other novels and it really does a better job of explaining what all the beats actually mean. You can get a pretty good idea using the PDF and the free version that she gives you, but I 100% recommend reading the book so that you do get the explanation behind everything, which makes it way better than just, you know, looking at the PDF. But anyways, I will leave links to both the where to buy the book and the PDF for you below. But again, if you're a romance writer, this is great. And I use this usually for all of my romance novels. I write primarily romance, but I usually at least run through the basics of this because it doesn't matter if your novel is 80,000 words or 10,000 words. When it comes to romance, there are certain beats of a romance novel that you need to hit in order for it to be a successful romance novel. If you don't hit those beats, your readers just really aren't going to care about the couple that's falling in love. And that's the truth of it. So I usually try to go through and I kind of do it in 2 parts. I'll do the ways that I'm getting ready to show you next is my main way of plotting. It's extremely detailed. We're going to be there for a minute. I'm going to go through an entire example with you guys on how to do that plotting method. But then when I finish that plotting method, I go back with the romancing the beats and just make sure I've hit all the beats. Just to make sure I've hit them all. So I use a combination of the 2. So if that helps you any. All right. So what is the main way that I plot? Well, I actually learned how to do this from another YouTuber, and I think I don't know what her real name is. I think she calls herself Kat, so I'm assuming it's Katytastic. I was calling her Katytastic, but in the actual book or in the actual video, not book, she says cat. This cat. So I'm like, oh, is it Katytastic then? I don't know. So ignore this. I have TubeBuddy, so you'll see all the analytics from TubeBuddy. But this is the video. It's by Katytastic. It's how to outline 3-act, 9-block, 27-chapter with an example. She has another video, I believe. Let me go to her channel. That is similar, I believe. Her most popular ones. Maybe not, but I know there you go. Yeah, outlining with Scrivener. She talks about it there too. And then how I outline 3 acts, 9 blocks, 27 chapters. So she has like 3 versions of this up here, but this one here with this picture with the whiteboard, this is the best version that she does the best explaining with. But that is how I plot. And so I would love to take credit for this, but 100% did not come up with this. This came from her, and I don't know where she came up with it. Doesn't really matter. I just find it's a great way to plot, and I'm going to show you how to do it. So I actually created a Google Doc spreadsheet, like a spreadsheet through Google Docs. that I use, and I'm going to have a version of this free for you guys, so I will also put a link to that. So if you also want to plot this way, I've got it for you. But again, watch her video because it's much more detail than even I can get into. So in order to walk through how to do this plot, I'm actually going to use Twilight as my example for the plot. I'm using Twilight for a couple of reasons. Number one, most people know Twilight. If you haven't read the book, you've seen the movie. I'm going to be referring to the movie version because I feel like more people have seen the movie than read the book. But even if you haven't read the book or seen the movie, Twilight is so popular, you probably at least have a basic idea of the plot. So that's why I'm going to use it as my example. All right, before we get into the details of how we're actually going to plot, I have this here as just a quick reminder of what a 3-act structure looks like. The reason I like this particular graphic is because I think it really coincides well with the way we're going to break down the 9 blocks and 27 chapters sort of breakdown. So as you guys know, the whole idea of a 3-act structure is that every book should have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and that each section of your novel is basically building up towards the climax, which is whatever the big thing of the book is, and then it resolves itself at the end. But just like every book has a beginning, middle, and end, every act should also have a beginning, middle, and end. And typically the way most books work is that you have, they have official words like stasis, some kind of inciting incident, and then you move on to the next thing. So here, basically, you're starting off with like a starting point of each act that's just going to keep building, right? So beginning, something that happens, some kind of incident, action, a mini climax, whatever. And then it sort of gets resolved, but then you get pushed into the next one, and then something happens. And then that sort of kind of ends up resolved until you get pushed into, oh my goodness, and then everything explodes, and then it resolves at the end. So I like this because you can see it's building, but you can also see that each act has a beginning, middle, end. So anyways, I explained that like 3 different ways. Hopefully that makes sense to you. And that also explains why we have this. So as you can see, I've got Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. And yes, I promise you I'm going to blow those up so it's a little bigger when we get there. But I also have each act broken into 3 parts again, beginning, middle, and end. Okay? So before we get into the details and I try to explain all of this to you, I'm going to blow this up because before I write any book, I like to do at the very top here, I like to do just a plot summary. And then below I go chapter by chapter plot detail. So for every book, you should have a hook into your book. This is whatever the opening scene of your book is that grabs the reader's attention and makes them want to keep reading. It could be a prologue, it could be really anything, but it's whatever hooks them into the book. So if we're looking at Twilight, the thing that hooks the reader into the book is that beginning scene where you've got Bella reflecting on death as James, not Hames, but James moves forward to kill her. Now, this is actually, for this book, it's a very popular device, but in this book, it's actually starting in the climax. So this is the climax battle where James is trying to kill Bella, and of course, Edward and everybody has to come save her. But it's the scene at the beginning of the movie where she's reflecting on, I never much thought about how I would die, or something. I don't know how exactly it's worded, but I never much thought about how I would die, but dying in the place of someone else seems like a good way to go, or something like that. That is the hook into the book. And the reason why it's the hook is because it's immediately you're thrown into a high stakes, high action, highly emotional moment in the story. And you're like, oh my goodness, what's going on? I have to read this book to find out how she got here and how she's going to get out of this situation. And that's what you really want to look for at any book you're going to read, is how do I really draw them into this and make them want to keep reading? All right. Now, Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3, this is just a personal preference thing. Some people like to do plot point 1, plot point 2, plot point 3, and they get rid of midpoint, and they just do Act 1, 2, 3, plot points. I like to sum up each act because remember, each act for me, it's beginning, middle, end, and each act has a beginning, middle, end. So for Act 1 for Twilight, the focus of Act 1 is the building of characters. That's the entire point of Act 1. Now, there's more to it. You're also building the main storyline. But if you look at Twilight, that whole first act is the building of the characters, okay? But Act 2 is the building of the love story. So this is where you really see Bella and Edward become the couple. And this is also, again, the middle of the book. And if you think about the whole storyline about she's intrigued by Edward because he's different, the middle of the book is when she finds out that Edward is a vampire. So that's also your midpoint, your plot point 2, your main midpoint, right? And then, of course, Act 3, I don't know how to explain this other than to say fight with the vampires. This is where her and Edward are in the relationship, and their relationship is threatened by the other vampires, which then, of course, leads to the climax, which is where James is killed, and Edward saves Bella. Spelling is not my strong suit today. And the resolution, I'm just going to put prom, because I think we know the resolution is at the end of the book. They are together. They've survived this big battle. They're having this romantic dance. She's talking to Edward about, being turned. And he's like, I just want you to be human with me. And I love you. And they have that romantic dance at prom. Okay. So this is the basic, short, sweet, to the point plot summary of Twilight, right? This is it. One of the things I've added, because I write romance and romance tends to be written in series, is I have a hook to the next book. Now, if you are not writing part of a series, you do not need number 12. You can just either leave it blank or delete it. But for me, I write series a lot. And if you're going to write a series book, there needs to be a reason why someone reads the next book in the series. For Twilight, of course, we know it's 4 books in the series. Well, 5 if you consider the one that got released of Edward's point of view, and there's been spin-offs and whatnot. But the main series is 4 books, right? Is it 5 books? 5 books, technically, because, are movies, I should say. 5 movies, 4 books. You know what I'm trying to say. Just go along with it. Anyway, so why should anybody pick up New Moon? Well, at the end of the movie, I'm using the movie again as my example. This would be Victoria not dead. If you remember from the movie, they're dancing on the gazebo at the prom, having this romantic moment, and it pans up, right? The camera pans up. You see the beautiful trees and the lights, and it's oh so romantic. And it goes back and back until you're in the prom, looking out the window, and whose eyes do we see from? But Victoria. And we realize, oh crap, Victoria is not dead. So is she going to go after Bella? We'll have to watch the next movie, aka read the next book, in order to find out what happens. That is the hook into the next book. All right. So basic plot outline. Do we need a minute? Do we need a breather? I'm going to take a drink of some water here because we're going to get into the details and it's going to take a minute. All right, now we're going to break it down. 3 acts, beginning, middle, end. So, hold on to your horses. I'm just kidding. It's going to be fine. All right, here is my outline sheet. And again, I'm going to try to blow this up just a little bit for you guys to see if I can make it just a little bigger. I feel like 150 is too high. Let's do one. That's a little better. This is a little better. Hopefully you guys can see that okay. It seems small to me, but hopefully it works for you. All right, so Act 1, as we know, is the building of the relationships. And of course, we know that the introduction is quite literally the introduction. This is when Bella moves to Forks. And these are all of the beginning scenes of the movie, because again, I'm using the movie as my reference. This is the scene of her dad taking her in the car and her seeing the house. And then the first day at school where she has trouble finding classes and the whole gym class incident and I can't remember which one it was, but I think it's the guy who's like, I want to interview you for the school news. It's all those awkward first day of school scenes and everything that she goes through at the beginning, right? Now, for Twilight, there's a little bit of a disagreement about the inciting incident. Some people say the inciting incident doesn't happen until Edward saves Bella from the parking lot incident, but I actually disagree. I think the inciting incident of this entire plot line is when Edward is weird in biology class, because realistically, if he didn't act all weird and creepy, I don't necessarily know that Bella would have noticed him as much. She did think he was cute before then, but the incident in biology is the main reason why she takes an interest in Edward. So to me, the inciting incident is when Edward acts all funky and weird, like she has the worst BO possible in biology class, which weirds her out, and then starts her going, why is he acting so weird towards me? Is what I consider inciting incident. Again, it's highly debated, but that's my opinion. So just go along with it. Number 3, the fallout would be whatever the reaction to the inciting incident would be. And in this case, it's really that it spikes Bella's interest in Edward. And if you remember, I can't spell, Bella's interest. And if you remember, this is when Bella really starts to pay close attention to Edward. She notices things like his hands are cold and he acts weird. He doesn't talk like everybody else. His eyes change color depending on his emotion. She starts to notice just weird things. And again, the whole thing that the inciting incident did was just make her more interested in Edward and pay closer attention. Now, number 4 is the beginning of kind of the midpoint of Act 1. And again, we're building those relationships and starting the relationship with Edward, right? So here is the reaction / rebel. Now, it could actually be rebelling. So in a lot of books, it's rebelling against your circumstances, rebelling against authority, rebelling against wherever life is taking you, whatever. But in Bella's reaction, it's really more of or in Bella's circumstance, I should say, it really is more of a reaction. And in this situation, this is when the friendship between Bella and Edward starts to form into an actual friendship. I don't know how to word this, so I'm going to say beginnings of relationship, because they're kind of, if you remember from the movie, like they have the scene in the lunchroom, they have the scene on the field trip, just little bits and pieces of them talking and her noticing things about him. And it's enough of a beginning of the relationship that when the action, the big midpoint of Act 1 happens, it makes sense. So Edward and her have developed this sort of weird friendship that results in Edward saving her in the parking lot. That is really what gets the whole storyline going. This would be your plot point 1. If you want to do plot point 1, plot point 2, plot point 3, this is your plot point 1. Okay. What are the consequences of this? Well, the consequence is that Bella knows Edward is different. If she was wondering about him before, but having a guy stop a moving vehicle with his hand was obviously proof to her that there is something weird going on about Edward. So what is the pressure that comes from this consequence? Well, Bella starts asking questions. This is it. This is when she starts researching. She starts talking to other people. She's asking the other kids in school what's going on. She talks to Jacob, which then brings the plot twist where Jacob tells Bella about the Cold Ones. So he tells her the legend of the Cold Ones and about his tribe and all that kind of stuff. And as soon as he tells her that, you suddenly see her go home and start researching, because now Bella thinks Edward could be a vampire, or a cold one, as they say. A cold one. She doesn't know it's necessarily a vampire yet, but she knows it's whatever the cold one is. Okay? So this is Act 1. Again, the whole purpose of this act, even though you're building the relationship with Edward, okay, it's really focusing on relationships in general and establishing this world and these questions that are kind of coming from all the weird oddities about Edward. So there's Act 1. Now, this pushes you into Act 2. Act 2, the new world, is when you're getting adjusted to the new world. So I'm going to call this navigating friendships. This is when you see her sort of developed these friendships with other people in the school. And it also goes to fun and games, which again is that scene in Port Angeles where they invite her to go to Port Angeles to look, I think, is it prom dresses or formal dresses, or I don't know, I think it's prom dresses. That really gets her into the old world or into this new world. However, the signs of the old world pop up in Port Angeles when Edward saves her from the creepers in Port Angeles. So Edward saves her from the creepers. I'm going to call them creepers. And this is the scene where he gets out of his car, he rescues her from the creepers, and then they end up at the restaurant, right? So this would be kind of everything's looking good, moving forward, and then Edward gets all creepy again. And now it just reiterates the old juxtaposition of something's weird with Edward. All right, now on to the midpoint, right? The midpoint would be the first one, the build up to the midpoint is when Edward is at Bella's house when Jacob arrives. Because if you remember correctly, there is this weird sort of visual, they don't really say much, but they kind of give each other like evil glares at Bella's house. And he acts real weird and kind of tries to warn Bella against Jacob or against Edward. And that's when Bella's like, okay, this is messed up. There's just way too much going on between this and all this going on in Port Angeles, the weird, creepy behavior, and that he knew what they were thinking, all the things leading up to this, where she finally is like, you got to tell me what's going on. And of course, we have the infamous scene where Edward confirms he is a vampire. This is the say it out loud, or something like that. And she's like, vampire. So that's the midpoint. And then the reversal would be, what is the reaction that she has to this? What happens after the end of this confession? And I'm going to be like, Bella don't care. Bella don't care. Bad grammar. Don't care. Bella doesn't care. She loves him anyway. And she's like, I'm not scared of you. You would never hurt me. And all this kind of stuff, right? So that is it. Now, what is the consequence of her finding out that Edward is a vampire? I'm going to put Bella in danger because Edward mentions this to her, that during different scenes that they have throughout the next few like sections of the movie, that you're in danger. You're really not supposed to know we exist. I'm supposed to kill you if you know we exist. And, you know, it puts her in immediate danger because she knows the truth about him and his family. What are the trials they go through? Well, the trials are that the meetings of the family. So these are the scenes where she meets Edward's family. And as we know from the movie and the book, some of the family members are happy to have her there and some of them are not. Same thing with Bella's father. He is not necessarily thrilled that his daughter is dating a Cullen. So that is the trials. But at the end of the day, they love each other and they admit their feelings. This would be the dedication. They decide that no matter what, we shall love each other and be together. So, as you can see, we have the building of friendships, the building of their relationship until the point where they love each other, okay? Now, crap's about to get real. About to get real. We're going to throw down. Not really. Okay. Act 3. Okay? Calm before the storm. I call this the baseball scene. Baseball scene. This is when they've obviously been together long enough where it's completely normal for her to go play baseball with the family, right? They're sort of established, I would say, in their dating relationship at this point. So the calm before the storm is the baseball scene. So what's the plot twist of Act 3? James spots Bella. These are the evil vampires, the bad vampires. They try to hide the fact that Bella is human, but, you know, the wind blows and he gets a little whiffy and decides that, oh, taste a human, time to eat her. And, of course, that's not a good idea for Edward because he loves her, doesn't want her to get killed. So the darkest moment is literally the darkest moment when all hope is lost. What are we going to do? It's all over. And this is when Bella flees Forks. This is when they basically tell her that in order to protect your father and to protect all the people you love, you need to cut off contact with your parents, flee the area until we can figure out what's going on with these evil vampires. And the only way you can do that is to leave the area. Power within, it depends on your plot. With Twilight, it's not quite as clear. For a lot of novels, this literally means that all hope is lost, but the main character finds the strength within themselves to fight for what they want. And in some ways, this is true in Twilight too. This is really solidified for me in the movie with Alice's vision. That's why I'm putting Alice's vision here. And this is when Bella decides to fight for herself. I'm just putting Bella decides to fight because in Alice's vision, she realizes that the people she loves the most are in danger and that the only way she can actually fight this in any way that feels good to her is just, I would rather sacrifice myself than to have the people I love harmed. Actions and rally the troops is when the main character of the story rallies the rest of the characters around her or around him, depending on who your character is, in order to fight for what they want. With this one, again, it kind of already exists at this point, but it's really more of an individual battle within Bella. So this is when Bella goes to Phoenix. I think it's Phoenix, isn't it? With A Mother Lives, Phoenix. It's been a while since I've watched and read Twilight, but I believe it's Phoenix. She goes to where her mother is because she knows that from Alice's vision, her mother is in danger. So she goes to Phoenix to protect her mother. This is also when she gets that phone call from James saying that, you know, I have your mother and I'm going to kill her. So the action she takes is that she goes to rescue her mother. Convergence, when all of the pieces of the story come together and you finally get to that last final battle. This, I call this the dance studio. This is that scene where Bella gets to the studio, finds out she was tricked and that James does not have her mother. This is also when the Cullens find out that Bella left and they have also came after her to rescue her from herself and from the evil vampires. Now, we're leading into the final part of the story here. Number 25 is the battle. Now, in this book, it is an actual battle. They have the big old fight in the dance studio where you have all these flipping and flying and fires and all this crazy crap. But in some books, the battle doesn't have to be a physical battle. It can be an emotional battle. And it just depends. Every storyline is different. I've read lots of romance novels where the battle is literally the couple having some kind of like, they always say come to Jesus moment where they decide that they need to be together sort of thing. But, you know, the battle can be whatever it is that the fight is that's going to resolve your story. And then, of course, it comes to the climax, which is usually the end of whatever this battle is. And in this case, this is James is killed. It's a two-part climax here. James is killed. But the second part here is that Edward saves Bella. Because even though the main point of this story, the main climax, was that Bella gets saved from the evil vampire, what's even more important in this story is that Edward overcomes himself, or I should say saves himself, and is able to then help Bella. Because if you guys remember from the movie and the book, that's the scene where Bella gets bitten and Edward has to suck the venom out, but he's battling within himself. That's why I said it's an outward battle against James, but also an inward battle because Edward's fighting with himself about, I can't suck the venom out because I won't stop and I'll kill her. And Carlisle's like, no, I believe in you. If you love her, you can do this. And then Edward decides to fight against himself to then save Bella from dying or from turning into a vampire. All right. And of course, we talked about this before, but the resolution of the entire story is the prom scene where they talk about all their feelings for one another. She talks about maybe being turned one day, but Edward's like, no, I like you as you are. And so this here is your 3-act structure. We take this down a notch so you can see the whole thing together. But this is a detailed version of Twilight. Now, why do I like this so much? Because you're like, this is a lot of detail. And it is a lot of detail. And as she mentions this in her video, Katytastic does, but basically this is a very easy way to get a rough draft out because at this point you have 27 chapters. That's how I do my rough draft in this kind of a plot detail. Each one of these is a chapter. For me it is, anyway, at least for my rough draft. Now, when I go back and I edit my rough draft, maybe it's not 27 chapters, right? Like maybe this is 500 words, okay? And this is 1500. So maybe it makes sense that this is one chapter. Or maybe this suddenly is like enough words for 3 or 4 chapters. That's fine. When I go back to the editing process, I will then adjust these to be 3 to 4 chapters. But when it comes to sitting down for like NaNoWriMo and just getting the words down, you can very easily be like chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, and so on and so forth, 27 chapters, and you have a rough draft, okay? It's a very easy way to just get the entire story down on paper as they speak, and then you have plenty of information to then go back and edit it and rearrange it however you want to when you reach that point. All right, so that is my favorite way of plotting. Again, it is a lot of detail, but I found that by doing that, I don't end up with writer's block, which is absolutely amazing for me because I have the most horrible writer's block a lot of the time. So that is my favorite way of plotting. I would like to know, what are your favorite ways of plotting? Does anybody else get into this much detail, or am I just weird? Because I feel like people are like, why do you do so much? I'm like, because it works for me. The more detail, the better. I know other people that could never, could never. And so I would love to know, how do you plot? How do you organize all of your thoughts to have, like, I don't know, a better version for yourself? So as I mentioned before, anything I mentioned, I'm going to leave links to, including my spreadsheet. I'm just going to have my outline of Twilight as my example, and then a blank one if you guys want to use that. I'll leave links to Romancing the Beat. I'll leave links to Katytastic, however she says it, video. And I would love for you guys to share how you plot, especially, do you have a video on plotting? Share it with me. I'd love to check it out because I think it's really cool to learn from other authors and then figure out which ones work best for you. Maybe there's something even better than this one. All right. I hope you guys found this helpful. Happy Preptober. And I'll see you guys soon. Bye.